Blood thinners are a type of medication that could be prescribed to people of any age, specifically after a surgery of nearly any type. They work by decreasing the formation of blood clots, which can help prevent heart attacks, strokes, and other serious medical problems. One such blood thinner widely used in medical practice is Plavix. However, in a recent development, a Hawaii court has ordered the manufacturers and distributors of Plavix to pay the state a combined $916 million. The judgment came after it was found that the companies failed to disclose the medication's efficacy and safety, as announced by the state attorney general on Tuesday. The judgment was made against Bristol Myers Squibb Company and 3 U.S.-based subsidiaries of the French pharmaceutical company Sanofi. First Circuit Court Judge James Ashford determined that approximately 30% of patients, particularly non-Caucasians, might experience a diminished response to Plavix, yet the companies did not update their label, according to Attorney General Ann Lopez. In the end, Judge Ashford concluded that these pharmaceutical defendants acted in bad faith by marketing a product that could potentially have devastating effects on Hawaii patients, knowing that the medicine would lack efficacy for a substantial portion of the population. I am so happy that the state has made the drug companies pay for this willful misrepresentation to human beings for the purpose of profit. Some might say, what's the harm if the drug didn't thin the blood on certain patients? There's a lot of harm. There is the obvious risk versus the benefit. What are the percentage of people who actually have a stroke after surgery? And what are the percentages of adverse effects? That's the risks versus the benefits, which we will discuss. Then there is the broader picture of whether patients really need to take the drug at all. Are we ingesting drugs for potential medical conditions that could occur? This one is called preventative medicine. Are these drugs really preventing anything that is real for most people? Then there are even larger scenarios that can be considered like the psychological effect of a nation that believes drugs can cure just about anything from heart disease to dysphoria. This psychological and physical dependence on drugs makes the people vulnerable to powerful corporations with very unsavory associations. How do you think certain drug manufacturers become as powerful as Pfizer? It's all about connections in the world of the elite. So if you think the cancer stops with Hollywood, music, and politics, you're going to be quite surprised in the end. So let's take a look further into the justification for post-surgical blood thinner prophylaxis. Chapter 2. Risk versus benefit. So the first thing we want to look at is the actual number of people who have strokes after surgery to see how much risk there actually is. Studies have shown that the risk of stroke after non-cardiac surgery is pretty low. The incidence of perioperative stroke, occurring during or immediately after surgery, is approximately 0.1% to 1.9%, depending on the type of surgery and patient risk factors. For cardiac surgery, the risk is higher, ranging from 1% to 5%. A study published in the journal Stroke found that the incidence of perioperative stroke after non-cardiac surgery was about 0.5 or 0.5%. Another study in the Annals of Surgery indicated that the risk of stroke within 30 days after major non-cardiac surgery was about 0.7%. People should understand that the risk of stroke goes down as time goes on, so why are so many patients on blood thinners 2 years later for perioperative stroke prevention? These are common sense questions. You don't need to be a medical professional to understand that the risk is quite low, yet many doctors use scare tactics to frighten patients into taking prophylactic blood thinners. Now, if you are a cardiac patient or have other comorbidities such as diabetes or smoking, then your risk of stroke is higher, but it's still only 1 in 20 or 5%. That's nothing to scoff at, and I would want to lower my risk through diet, movement, stress, energy practices, etc. Also, there are foods that thin the blood, and a baby aspirin is also quite safe, but whenever possible, heal the body without drugs. So we know the risk of stroke after surgery is quite low, so let's look at the risk of taking Plavix and other blood thinners. Before we move on though, I think that it's important to go over some dietary ways that you can thin your blood and increase circulation. So let's look at a few blood thinning foods next. Certain foods are known to have blood thinning properties due to their natural anticoagulant compounds. Here is a list of foods that may help thin the blood. Garlic. Garlic contains allicin, which has anticoagulant effects. Ginger contains salicylate, which is a natural blood thinner like aspirin, which is also a salicylate. Turmeric contains curcumin, which has anti-inflammatory and blood thinning properties. Cayenne pepper contains salicylates and capsaicin, both of which can help thin the blood. Cinnamon contains coumarin, which can act as a blood thinner. Pineapple contains bromelain, an enzyme that can reduce blood clotting. Onions contain sulfur compounds that can help prevent blood clotting. Tomatoes contain lycopene and salicylates, which can have a blood thinning effect. Blueberries, rich in antioxidants and salicylates, which can help thin the blood. Grapes, especially red and purple grapes, contain flavonoids that have anticoagulant properties. There are also some foods which are mild blood thinners, including almonds, high in vitamin E, which can act as a mild blood thinner. Olive oil contains phenolic compounds that can help reduce blood clotting. Dark chocolate contains flavonoids that can help improve blood flow and reduce clotting. Red wine contains resveratrol and flavonoids, which can have a blood-thinning effect. Green tea contains catechins and other compounds that may help thin the blood. It's important to note that while these foods can contribute to a healthier blood flow, they should be consumed in moderation. If you are on blood-thinning medication, you should consult with your healthcare provider before making significant changes to your diet, as combining these foods with medication could increase the risk of bleeding. The most dangerous side effect is intracranial hemorrhage, ICH, which is a type of bleeding that occurs within the skull. The incidence of intracranial hemorrhage related to Plavix use is approximately 0.51% per year. This does not account for other untoward effects. So the risk of having just an intracranial hemorrhage is 0.5 to 1%, and the risk of a stroke after surgery is 0.1%, 1% for the average person. Pretty much the same. You might be thinking that a stroke is a pretty bad disability, and you are right. The 30-day mortality rate for a stroke is 10 to 30%. The 30-day mortality rate for intracranial hemorrhage caused from blood thinners ranges from 30 to 50% more. Survivors often have severe brain damage. Another risk of Plavix is gastrointestinal bleeding, which is 2%. Severe GI bleeding, especially if not treated promptly, can be fatal. The mortality rate increases with the severity and rapidity of the bleeding. Significant GI bleeding often requires urgent medical interventions, such as blood transfusions, endoscopic procedures to locate and stop the bleeding, and sometimes surgery. These interventions carry their own risks and complications. There are various other side effects of Plavix and other blood thinners, but the most severe deal with excessive thinning of the blood. That's what it's so important to have regular platelet tests if you are on any blood thinner. To be clear, each case should be evaluated as there is rational use of blood thinners, such as after orthopedic surgeries for a few months. The key is to research and ask questions whether your doctor likes it or not. Ask questions, and if you don't get respectful answers, get another opinion. And remember that the risk decreases with time, so after about 6 months, you should be having the discussion about stopping them. So we've looked at the risks of using Plavix and we've looked at the benefit. Now let's look at the practice of preventative medicine or the use of prophylactic blood thinners before and after surgery, to understand the implications of long-term prescription drug use from a psychological and physiological standpoint. First, we must consider that the majority of chronic disease is preventable. Did you know that up to 80% of heart disease and stroke is preventable through lifestyle changes? Around 90% of type 2 diabetes is preventable through lifestyle modifications. Up to 80% of chronic respiratory diseases are preventable, which is largely linked to smoking. And even 30 to 50% of certain cancers are preventable through lifestyle changes. My belief is that those figures are much higher when you consider the effect of radiation, processed foods, pesticides, microplastics, and other environmental factors. So we must ask ourselves, if so much chronic disease is preventable, why do we have so much of it? That is a very complex subject that can be different based on each person's life experiences, and I'm not going to lecture you on lifestyle changes. One thing that I would like you to understand is that the placebo effect is very real. And I would venture that at least 70% of the population is subject to it. To put it simply, if a person believes that a drug will cure what ails them, then they have inhibited their ability to self-heal. I'm going to briefly touch on the placebo effect because it is very relevant to one's ability to heal naturally. Several individual factors determine the effectiveness of the placebo effect, including one's expectations. Belief in the effectiveness of a treatment can influence the perception of symptoms and lead to improvements in health outcomes. When individuals expect a treatment to be beneficial, the brain releases neurotransmitters such as endorphins, dopamine, and serotonin, which can modulate pain perception and mood. Also, conditioning or previous experiences contribute to the placebo effect. For example, if a person has experienced symptom relief with a particular treatment in the past, they may respond similarly to subsequent treatments, even if they are given sugar tablets or other placebos. Neuroimaging studies have shown that placebo responses are associated with changes in brain activity, particularly in regions involved in pain perception, emotion regulation, and reward processing. Also, placebo-induced symptom improvement can trigger the release of endogenous opioids, cannabinoids, and other neurotransmitters, which can modulate pain perception and promote a sense of well-being. The very ritual of receiving treatment, such as taking a pill or undergoing a medical procedure, can also contribute to the placebo effect. Factors such as the appearance, color, and packaging of the treatment can influence the perceived effectiveness of the intervention. The placebo effect is not limited to pain. Numerous ailments can be improved through the placebo effect. Individual responses to placebos can vary widely, but the placebo effect can still play a role in symptom management for many patients, even in conditions with clear physiological abnormalities. Additionally, placebo responses can be influenced by factors such as patient expectations, beliefs, and the therapeutic context, highlighting the importance of considering the psychosocial aspects of healthcare in treatment strategies. In summary, I'd like you to know that many chronic diseases that require surgery are preventable and treatable without drug intervention. Lastly, I'd like you to understand one final aspect of the blood thinner business, so follow along to the next chapter with me. We're almost done. I've touched on this in the past, so I won't go very deep into it, but the body itself actually changes when you take drugs, whether they are prescription drugs or illegal drugs. The mechanisms are all the same. The human body is a machine. Every process that occurs in your body has a meticulously orchestrated pathway, including many chemical interactions. When you take chemicals, also known as drugs, from the outside, your body shuts off its own internal production of similar chemicals which fit the same receptors in the body during metabolism. A feedback system designed to regulate various endogenous chemicals stops your own production, and the longer it's shut down, the longer it takes to restart. That is the mechanism of addiction. When you stop taking the drug, you have a period of withdrawal until your body starts making its own painkillers that fit in those receptors. So you go through pain. Abrupt withdrawal of a blood thinner can cause rebound clotting. This issue is dear to my heart because I watched both my mom and my dad on blood thinners. Once, where the short-term use saved my dad's life from a pulmonary clot, which he had only a 20% chance of beating, and he did. Another experience was with my mom, who was on blood thinners for years for mild tachycardia, which was likely related to stress, because she had a plethora of other symptoms related to stress. We successfully weaned her off of the blood thinners, in spite of her doctor insisting that she was going to have a stroke. We had her eating blood-thinning foods and had her take a baby aspirin if she felt a flutter. In almost 2 years, she never had an episode. She went back on the blood thinners after being pressured by a family member and was in the hospital at least twice over the next 6 months with bleeding issues. I've seen a lot about drugs and the medical system in my years as a pharmacist, a drug regulator, a fraud investigator, a daughter, a mom, and a grandmother. I've always been acutely aware of what was going on with the healthcare of my loved ones. There is no doctor, pharmacist, or nurse that would put the amount of thought and research into my loved ones' conditions that I will. So with 2 elderly parents, I put a lot of time into studying and observing blood thinners. I will never say that you should never take them. I truly believe my dad would have died from a pulmonary embolism without blood thinners. My mom was just the opposite. She was put on drugs that messed her little body up over the years. That also happened to my dad. So I say that caution is critical with blood thinners and any long-term drug regimen. Know the risks both with and without the drug, and be sure to interpret the science yourself rather than believing the data that your doctor has been fed by the drug manufacturers. It's sad. Get it. Physicians are extremely busy and they deserve some downtime, so I don't blame them. It's the system. It actually discourages natural treatment in many cases by its refusal to study, reimburse, and support holistic medicine. No video about a prescription drug would be complete without looking at the profit derived from a drug which people are often prescribed for the rest of their lives to treat a non-existing condition with a very low incidence of occurrence. So here we go. Plavix was the highest grossing drug with $1.6 billion in sales in the first quarter of 2012. before its sales plummeted due to the expiration of the patent opening the way for generics, which quickly followed. Today, the anticoagulant market was valued at $21.45 billion in 2021, which is over 13 times the sales at the peak of Plavix. That tells us it's being used more and more because sales of blood thinners are projected to reach $80.29 billion by 2032. That's almost a $60 billion increase in sales in just about 10 years. According to various studies and healthcare data, the majority of blood thinner users are age 65 and above, with usage increasing significantly in those age 75 and older. So these hopeful projections no doubt have to do with both inflation as well as the aging of the baby boomers, a huge demographic due to post-war reunions which stimulated a population boom. So things are looking up for Big Pharma striving to have everyone over the age of 65 on blood thinners. I hope you have found this video helpful if you are approaching your senior years so that you can modify your diet, activity, and stress to mediate your blood flow. I must caution anyone who is currently on blood thinners not to abruptly discontinue them. Rather, work with a doctor who will closely monitor your clotting as you slowly add blood-thinning foods to your diet and taper off the drugs. If you like my videos, don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment. Have a great Memorial Day weekend. Till next time, take care and laugh as much as you can.